I'm Pete Lesher, and I'm Chief Curator for Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Smith and Tangier Island both stand out as Smith as the only inhabited offshore island in Maryland, and Tangier as the only inhabited offshore island in Virginia. That is to say, these are the only islands that you can't drive to. You can't, there's no causeway, there's no bridge, there's no driving connection. If you want to get there, you've got to go by boat. And there used to be a lot of islands like this in the Chesapeake that were whole communities, not just a house or two, but whole towns, whole villages that inhabited them. And the tendency is that for these more isolated places, frankly, it's harder to live in a place like Smith and Tangier remain as these inhabited islands, even though they don't have that convenient connection. They were inhabited beginning sometime in the 18th century. Hard to know exactly when. There certainly are land records that show these places were owned, that some people had maybe herds of cattle or pigs or something like that on some of these islands. Tangier particularly, there's a record of that. It's not really clear exactly when we start seeing a family living full-time out there. But it's very clear that the way they started using these islands early on was they were farming them. You imagine the natural state of these islands on all the high ground, on all the ground that was high enough not to be marsh. You would typically have a stand of woods. These islands would have been marsh and on the uplands forested. Well, what do? You're not going to farm in the marshland, you're going to farm on the uplands. So they cleared a lot of these woods. And that deforestation probably helped accelerate what ultimately led to these islands slowly. You've got islands that started off as hundreds of acres that shrink to scores of acres or dozens of acres as they get eaten away. Smith and Tangier are still plenty large that they support these communities. But even if you look at the way settlement has happened on these islands, you see a kind of contraction toward the center. I don't think that sea level rise is an explanation for the settlement pattern, except to the extent that it may have accelerated the abandonment of some of the more outlying villages. In some cases, they literally moved their houses from one of these communities to another within the island. The people of these island communities, Smith and Tangier as particularly good examples, are famously resilient, are famously adaptable. These are communities that started off as farming communities, and when all this opportunity arrived with the oyster boom in the late 19th century, well, frankly, it attracted more people to the island. It made much more sense to cover the high land with houses and use this as a base for oystering, and later in the 20th century for crabbing. Seizing opportunity there. Tangier, a lot of, particularly the women on Tangier, seeing opportunity in tourists arriving to the island and saying, hey, we can make some business out of this, and opening up a restaurant, and opening up an inn, opening up trinket shops and other businesses, an ice cream shop that catered to all these people who were coming to the island. Smith Island, interestingly, never really caught on to that. The attitude on Smith Island was always, well, why would anybody want to come here? And it was only in the 1990s that they took the initiative to pull together a community museum saying, well, all these people are coming, we might as well give them something to look at. Ultimately, yeah, I do think that the doom of either of these communities is going to be the waters encroaching. I could go on and on for you.